Letzgus, Sister Marian Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Sister Mary Ann.
Correct.
Well, thank you for coming to tell your story. And this is a very important part of our history of the congregation. So you are going to be more than just your face. You're going to have your story on tape and preserved for all eternity. So let's begin with where you began. Where did you start your journey? Your parents, your hometown, your schools, your siblings?
Okay, my hometown is Port Huron, Michigan, and I was born there on 2 weeks after Jesus' birthday. So Christmas, then New Year's, then my birthday. And my parents were high school sweethearts. My mom was trained in grade school by the Adrian Dominicans, and my dad by the IHMs at the north end of town. And they met in St. Stephen's High School.
In
Port
Huron?
In Port Huron. And they became high school sweethearts. They graduated from high school in 1934, and they didn't get married until 1937. And after that happening, 7 little children came along.
7?
7.
Okay.
Pat was born in 1937. I was born in 39. And then Mom had a miscarriage right after me. So I don't know if that says anything. But Peggy came along and 30 months later. And then Peggy and Eddie are 11 months apart. And then Billy and Mike and Kathy. And they're all 2 years apart. And as time went on, at 4.5, I went to kindergarten. And I enjoyed school. I listened very carefully. And my grandfather said I had to be a good listener.
Good lesson.
So I sort of was an extrovert as a young child. All young children are. And I was an introvert during school time. And even when I came here to the academy after my mom died, I still was an introvert. And I would sit and listen and take everything in, but very seldom raised my hand to give answers.
Maybe that's because you're in a large family
Could
and everybody
be.
else was talking.
Well, I was the firstborn girl, so the social worker, when I came here, called me in and she says, "Do you realize that you've been a little mother since you were about 7.5 or 8 years old?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And I had to help cook the meal, wash the dishes, do the laundry, clean the bathroom, all those things I was trained quite efficiently in. And my mother was 100% Irish, and my father was 100% German. So that combination really made me something very special.
What were some special or happy times with the Letzgus family that you recall?
We would sit outside at night and we would play I Spy. And sometimes fireflies were flying around, or sometimes the kids were down at the corner under the street light singing songs. We would try to, it was dusk always when we played this game, and it was fun to do. And Mom taught me how to do puzzles, doing the outside edge first, because they were easier to find and put together by color. So I had a great attachment to my mom.
And your schooling, grade school, high school?
Grade school, I started off at Polk School, and when they came out with the Polk dollar, my brother was like 60, so I gave him 60 Polk dollar coins on his birthday card.
Explain what a Polk dollar is.
It's like a Kennedy half dollar, and it's, I think they were gold. A color of gold, but they weren't real gold. I couldn't afford that.
No.
So then I went to first grade, and there's a question I know you're going to be asking me. The reason I came to the Adrian Dominican Sisters.
Well, you didn't come in first grade, though.
No.
What happened in grade school and high school?
Well, in grade school, okay.
You had-
I loved my first grade teacher. She had a sandbox in the room, and her name was Sister Helen Joseph Kozel. She was from Ruth, Michigan.
Yeah.
And my second grade teacher was very patient with me because I had a hard time with words. And that's one reason I never raised my hand to speak, because I couldn't read. It was the sight method, and I knew no phonics.
Okay.
So that was the struggle through grade school. And I don't remember the name of my second grade teacher. My third grade teacher, I got in trouble with her a couple of times because of cursive handwriting.
So that's the trouble you got in. You couldn't do cursive.
I could do cursive, but when I made the Z of Letzgus and then went into the G, I had to continue with a pencil on the paper to write my whole name. And when you make the Z going into the G, it's an overstroke and coming around for an A. Well, when I finished the G, I had to do an upstroke into the U. Well, that was very difficult. And every time I wrote my name, she was standing right behind me and says, ah, ah, ah. So I got used to writing my whole name. And toward the end of the year, I started being tired of it. So I started writing Mary Ann Kearns on all my papers.
That was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name. And Sister was passing out papers late April or May, and she says, is there anyone in here who didn't get their papers? And I raised my hand, and I looked around. The kids started to snicker because you never knew what I was going to say. And she said, what's your name? And I looked at her with a question on my face. It's like, you know me, I've been in this room. You know, this is the thoughts going through my head. And I said, Mary Ann Letzgus. And she says, these papers don't say that. Now, I knew I was very free with talking to the nuns, very comfortable. And so I said, oh, do they say Mary Ann Kearns? And she said, well, yes, they do, but that's not your name. And with that, I just did a look around the room. And it was like to say, don't laugh at me, laugh with me, but not at me. And so she said, why did you do that? I took a deep breath, and I started talking very, very slowly. Well, Sister, you see, it's this way. I thought my mom deserved some credit. So
very creative, very creative.
So I figured by the time I got to fourth grade, I was really in trouble, because the nuns would talk at dinner and tell the stories of what happened in school. So as a consequence, I sat like you and I are sitting. My desk was right here, and your desk is right there. And I'm wood to the fourth grade teacher's desk, and my seat never got changed. And so I thought I couldn't get away with anything in fourth grade.
God, you started at an early age, didn't you? So then you went on to
Fourth grade and fifth grade.
high school?
Well, my mom died when I was in sixth grade.
Oh.
She had pneumonia, and the whole bunch of us kids were running back from one side of the bed to the other, and all of a sudden she keeled over. And she had pneumonia. Dad called her dad and said, Tom, call Father at St. Joe's and meet us at the hospital. Marge just collapsed. And then he said to me, Mary, take all the kids into the front room and start the rosary. Because I was a firstborn girl. Everything was on my shoulders. And I was like little mother. Whenever Mom had a baby, I had to fix breakfast and so on. So life went on, and she got to the hospital, and she needed 2 pints of blood. But the blood they gave her was tested with hepatitis.
Oh, dear.
And she had a bad, bad case of pneumonia. So within 3 days, she was dead.
Wow.
And I didn't know what death was. I never saw death. The next time we saw her, Mom was in the casket in the funeral home. And the baby was only 23 months. And Dad's holding Kathy. And she shouts out, Mommy's sleeping, Daddy. Wake up, Mommy, wake up. And with that, all the adults sitting in the funeral parlor came to Dad's aid to take the baby. And Dad shook his head no, and he left the room with the baby. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us went with various relatives. I have no idea which one went where. But then the service went on, the funeral, and the burial at the cemetery. And it was a hard time for Dad because he lost his wife, whom he loved so dearly. So push comes to shove. We were separated for 2 years. Peggy and I came to the academy. Pat went to military school in Detroit with the St. Joseph's. The baby went to Kentucky, and the other 3 boys were with family at the north end of Port Huron. Mike was with the German grandparents, and Peggy and I, on summertime, were with the Irish grandparents. And Dad's parents had moved into the family home and helped him to get it ready for us to come back. So after 8th grade here at the academy, Peggy went to 4th and 5th, and I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th, not 6th. My 6th grade teacher was Sister Marie Dennis, and my 7th grade teacher at the academy was Mary Dennis. And then in 8th grade I had Martin Marie. So everybody knew that I wanted to be an Adrian Dominican sister because I loved my 1st grade teacher. So
That's not the one that questioned you on your name, was it? Your 1st grade teacher?
No.
Okay.
No. My 3rd
So
grade
you were
teacher,
thinking about entering the convent in 8th grade?
in 1st grade.
But I mean, more
No,
serious. Okay.
I wasn't more serious in 8th grade, but that happened.
We didn't take them in 1st grade. Then.
No. That happened in sophomore year of high school. My great aunt.
And where were you, back in Port Huron?
I was in Port Huron
Okay.
at St. Stephen's with the IHMs.
Okay.
And the IHM religion teacher was my father's 4th grade teacher. So when we got home at freshman year, Dad said, "Who do you have?" And we said, "Sister Mary Walter." "Oh," he says, "beware of her, she knows how to crack knuckles." He had a hard time memorizing math tables in 4th grade. I had the same problem. But once I got that down pat, I flew through math. It was an interesting life.
So when did you actually enter the Adrian Dominicans?
After sophomore year, my great aunt, my grandfather's sister, she called me up on Thanksgiving Day, and I was only 14. And all the adults were in the kitchen and around an oval table. Pat and I were in the back room with all the little kids, and we were cutting their meat and helping them if they dropped something, we had to pick it up. We weren't eating at that time. We were just taking care of the whole gang, and there were about 18 kids in the back room. So Grandpa opened the door and he says, "Mary Aunt Dot wants to talk to you." That's his sister. And she says, and I took the phone and I said, "Yes, Aunt Dot." And she says, "Now that you've been to the academy for 2 years and you know the layout of the campus," she says, "what about going back this coming June and learning how to be an Adrian Dominican sister?" Well, that really hit my heart good. But I looked around the dining room and there wasn't one adult talking. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on stage. So I said, I put my hand over the receiver so she couldn't hear me, I thought. And I said, "Dad, Aunt Dot wants to know if it's okay with you if she gets me ready to go to Adrian this coming June and join the Adrian Dominican Sisters." And Dad said, "You know, Mary," and he's the only one there without a spouse. If my mother were alive, I think the answer would have been no. But he says, "You know, I can't stand in your way. If that's what you want for your lifetime," he says, "I will do everything I can do to make it possible for you."
So then you entered at that time.
Yeah,
and
but
how old were you?
I was 15 when I entered.
Was that you a prep then?
No,
We didn't have.
I went right into the postulancy.
Okay.
So there were 2 younger than myself, and there were 72 in my group.
Okay.
And so that was interesting.
So then you had your formation years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had Margaret Phillip as a postulant
Okay.
mistress and Patrick Jerome as a
Okay.
novice. One time I was in charge of prayer, and I was supposed to say, "Let us pray for the sisters of the novitiate." But when I got to the S word, it came out wrong. And I shouted out with the great Hebdomadarian voice, "Let us pray for the sinners of the novitiate." Patrick Jerome came out of her office faster than lightning. It was so funny. But at that time, I was so embarrassed. So,
Well, we didn't kick you out at that time,
No,
did we?
no,
Did we?
I got permissions to continue my life.
So you made profession,
Hmm.
and then you've been involved in many ministries. As you look back at your ministerial positions, are there a couple that perhaps left a great impression on you? I'm sure all of them did, because you seem to have enjoyed every one of
Yeah, I have.
your assignments. But is there one in particular that
I would say my very last assignment was my happiest assignment, because I was accepted for who I was. Nobody tried to put me into a mold.
and where was that?
Holy Cross in Marine City,
Marine City.
yeah.
Did you have most of your assignments in Michigan?
I started out in Michigan, and from St. Jude's I went to Ohio, to Pius X in Toledo, and then I went to Defiance, Ohio. And I used to always say, only defiant people go to Defiance. I was a big mouth. And so then I was sent there. And Mother Regetta came for visitation, and the thing that sticks out there is, she said, "Sister, do you think you need a change?" I had been there like 5 years. And I said, that was still in the era where we had mothers. We weren't just sister, the people in charge were mother. And I said, every year here is a change. And she says, how do you figure that? And I said, well, the superior of the house is also the principal of the school. And Sister Rose Michaeline was here for the half year that I was changed in the middle of the year because they needed a first grade teacher. And then I had a full year of first grade. Part of that year, because I knew math and science, they put me into 7th and 8th grade science for the afternoon, and Jane Thomas was then the superior. So push comes to shove. In those 5 years, I had 4 superiors.
So every time there was somebody new or there was a change, it was a new group.
Well, I don't think the principals could get along with the pastor. And so every year we had a new
How
person.
unusual.
So as a consequence, I said, do you realize that we follow the rule of St. Augustine in the constitutions, the sisters of the third order, but do you realize that we also have to put up with the personality of the person in charge? And so I did get a change that year. Like the chapter prioress called me up and said, where would you like to go? And I said, well, I'm just as happy being here as any place.
But your very last assignment, your very last mission, was the best one. Because
Right.
What was it?
It was Holy Cross in Marine City.
Right, but what was your responsibility?
I had 2nd grade there.
2nd grade?
Yeah. And I taught CCD. Every parish I was at, I had CCD. In Traverse City, I was 2nd grade, but we had all the way up to senior year of high school. And that was fun. And being with the 3 different Dominican communities, the Grand Rapids Dominicans, and then the Adrian Dominicans, I was the only one. And that was our first formation from New York.
Right, so I was
Traverse City.
just thinking.
So I felt very awesome there. And then the sisters that were...
Explain that for those that might be viewing this. When you said it was the first place, or we came from, we being the Adrian Dominicans.
Yeah. Before we settled in Adrian,
Right.
and before the Grand Rapids settled in Grand Rapids, and then the group, they are near Flint. I can't remember the name of the city, but there were 3 groups, and the group near Flint are now Sisters of Peace.
But as far as the Adrian Dominicans,
But I think there were the Grand Rapids and us, and then from Traverse City, we were only there a few years. And it was like the group in New York when they first settled in New York. And the place we lived at had been turned into a drugstore. So I'd walk down the street and the nuns would tell me the history of Traverse City.
because we came from New York to Traverse City and then
And then
from
to
Traverse
Adrian.
and to Adrian. So that was a very special. You were not there at that time.
No.
You weren't. Right.
So at that place, the thing I remember most is when I was leaving, the pastor called me into his rectory, and he says, "Can you be down here at 6 o'clock? I have a question for you." So I went down after supper, and I said, "What can I do for you, Father?" He says, "Well, you have to say yes to my question." And I said, "You know, Father, that's not in my philosophy." He says, "Then I won't ask it." And so then, because my curiosity being Irish and German, I said, "If it's at all possible for me to say yes, I will say yes. But it depends on what happens where I go." And he says, "Okay, my question is, if it doesn't work out where you go, will you come back here?" So I was loved and wanted there too. So I've had bumps along the way, and I've had growth along the way. I've had
When
friends
you've had
along
bumps,
the way.
what's a bump you've had?
Staying only 1 year in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you know, and I left freely there because we were already in regular clothes, but the bishop wanted the sisters dressed in the habit.
Okay.
And that was just one thing that sort of turned the whole table of Vatican II, you know.
Right.
So, and one of my sixth graders, she had gotten the award for her artwork for the poster to represent the Fort Wayne, Indiana, whatever it was, musical or artistic. She won, and she did the Holy Spirit and the tongues of fire. It was gorgeous. So I have a happy memories there too.
But all in all, you taught primary
Most
grades.
of the time.
And then you were asked to be a mentor
Oh yes.
for teachers. If you could just kind of quickly tell us that.
Okay, this is at Holy Cross in Marine City. I heard the first grade classroom being in an uproar like a half an hour before dismissal time, and I was still trying to teach. And so this wall and that wall, I could hear all the noise coming, and I thought, I can't handle this another year. So in 2003, I retired, and the principal said, "Can I meet you in the office after school?" So she proposed to me that she couldn't pay me for the job she was going to ask me to do, but I could be of service to the parish. And she asked that I would mentor the new teachers and tutor both ends of the spectrum. And in the course of that happening, the first grade teacher had never had a baby before, and she was pregnant. And I was asked to take the first grade for 3 months. And when they brought their science projects in, we did the science projects, and I sat down with each one and put it on primary paper. And the children then the next day copied it from the paper. I said, "Is this what you really want to say?" And there were only like 26 kids in the room. So that got all finished, and so when the parents walked in for the science fair, one father looked at the room and he saw all the IBM papers, but the children's writing of what they thought they learned.
Beautiful.
And he says, "Now I meet the legend."
Oh, what a nice tribute.
Yeah.
What a beautiful tribute. So you've had many blessings, and you certainly have, of the challenges and the bumps in the road, you certainly seem to have.
Well, with the death of my mother
Right,
and
right.
going through the novitiate
You
and
grew
being
up.
an adult. You had to be an adult overnight.
And being so creative with your name. That
I'm
was
still
the big-
making games for the Dominican Tutoring Center over here. I've already given them about 50 games.
Now, you have been here in Adrian a short time.
Right,
When
2.5 years.
2.5 years. How was it that you made that transition to come here, and then you had to leave your dear friend, your
Oh, yes.
Sister Elaine?
And when we tutored, she did the smart kids, and I
Right.
did the kids that needed help. I'm going out to see her next week.
But how did you make the decision, or how did you
Her
handle
brother
that?
died, and she went back to New
Uh-huh.
Hampshire. I was living alone. And then life got, when I stopped teaching, I went to the hospital and started giving communion on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then I'd give communion at our complex. And it got to the point that I started getting real tired.
Okay.
Okay, and so I wrote CJ, and I said, "I think I belong in Adrian, but maybe they don't have room, and maybe this and maybe that, and all the excuses for not coming in. And so she came for visitation, and she looked around my apartment, and she says, "You have a lot to download." So I started downloading, and having a garage sale really set me in. I mean, my blood sugar was up to A1C of 10. And when Dietzen saw me, he said, "Whoa."
So you actually came here
For health reasons.
for health reasons, but you made the decision, and that was in 2015.
Correct.
Okay, and you've
And
loved
that was October.
Okay, and you took time to settle in,
Uh-huh.
and then I see you volunteering in many places, chapel,
Uh-huh.
and so
I
you-
love the job in chapel.
Yes,
And
yes.
so we had a loss of one person who was sacristan, who one of the junior sacristans moved up to that spot. So I went to the head leader and I said, "I don't mind doing it every other week. And if I can be of service to the older sisters," sometimes I see them hobbling down on their wheelchair going like this very slowly. And I come behind and I say, "Can I walk you to the elevator?"
Oh, that's good.
And so
As we conclude, is there something that you can tell the viewers, maybe a lesson that you learned or a quote or something that was just very special to you that someone told you that you have lived by that you could share with us so that we could take that into account when we meet
Yeah.
bumps and challenges?
right, I have so many that I wake up in the morning and I say to Jesus, "If I can't smile today, smile for me." And by this time of the morning, just before Mass, I am in a mood of, I've got that smile on my face, I've got that joy in my heart. And the other day, one of the workers said, "You are a very happy sister."
Very good. So
So-
the smile speaks volumes
Yeah.
and appreciation. Well, Sister Mary Ann Letzgus, I still can't get over how creative you were with your name, and your mother needs some acknowledgement. Thank you so much for coming and telling us about your beginnings and the happiness you had in your various ministries. And know that the congregation joins me in expressing our gratitude to you for who you are and who you have become
Thank
in
you
this
very
journey
much.
with us. You've been with us a long time.
Yeah.
Age 15, you gave your young bones. So bless you as you continue.
I only have
In your
6
journey.
years and I'm a double diamond.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So thank you.
You're welcome.